Welcome to the Folktale Project. This is Dan Scholes. Today we have our final folktale from Germany, and it's an interesting one. Well, for the first time this week, it's not a ghost story, but it's an interesting mix between a religious tale and a pagan one. And it's one where we see the fairly common concept of the fairy circle and its curse of nearly eternal dancing. But in this instance, it's not brought on by fairies at all, but rather by a priest. This is The Dancers. The Sabbath day drew to a close in the summertide of the year of grace 1001, and the rustics of Rammersdorf amused themselves with a dance, as was their wont to do in the courtyard of the monastery. It was a privilege that they had enjoyed time immemorial, and it had never been gainsaid by the abbots who were dead and gone, but Anselm von Lohenberg, the then superior of the convent, an austere, ascetic man, who looked with disdain and dislike on all popular recreations, had long set his face against it, and had, moreover, tried every means short of actual prohibition to put an end to the profane amusement. The rustics, however, were not to be debarred by his displeasure from pursuing perhaps their only pleasure, and, though the pious abbot discountenanced their proceedings, they acquiesced not in his views, and their enjoyment was not one atom the less. The day had been very beautiful, and the evening was, if possible, more so. Gaily garbed maidens of the village and stalwart rustics filled the courtyard of the convent. A blind fiddler, who had fiddled 3 generations off the stage, sat in front of a group of elders of either sex who, though too old and too stiff to partake in the active and exciting amusement, were still young enough to enjoy looking on. A few shaven crowns peered from the latticed casements which looked out on the merry scene. The music struck up. The dance began. Who approaches? Why are there so many anxious glances cast in yonder direction? It is the abbot. "Cease your fooling," he spake to them, in a solemn tone. "Profane not the place nor the day with your idle mirth. Go home, and pray in your own homes for the grace of the Lord to govern ye, for ye are wicked and wilful and hard of heart as the stones." He waved his hand, as if to disperse them, but his words and his actions were equally unheeded by the dancers and the spectators. "Forth, vile sinners!" he pursued. "Forth from these walls, or I will curse ye with the curse." Still, they regarded him not to obey his behest, although they so far noticed his words as to return menacing look for look, and muttered threat for threat with him. The music played on with the same liveliness, the dancers danced as merrily as ever, and the spectators applauded each display of agility. "Well then," spake the abbot, bursting with rage, "an ye cease not, be my curse on your head. There may ye dance for a year and a day." He banned them bitterly. With uplifted hands and eyes he imprecated the vengeance of heaven on their disobedience. He prayed to the Lord to punish them for the slight of his directions. Then he sought his cell to vent his ire in solitude. From that hour they continued to dance until a year and a day had fully expired. Night fell, and they ceased not. Day dawned, and they danced still. In the heat of noon, in the cool of the evening, day after day, there was no rest for them. Their satiation was without end. The seasons rolled over them. Summer gave place to autumn, winter succeeded summer, and spring decked the field with early flowers as winter slowly disappeared, yet still they danced on. through coursing time and changing seasons with unabated strength and unpaired energy. Rain nor hail, snow nor storm, sunshine nor shade seemed to affect them. Round and round and round they danced, in heat and cold, in damp and dry, in light and darkness. What were the seasons? What the times or the hour or the weather to them? In vain did their neighbors and friends try to arrest them in their wild evolutions. In vain were attempts made to stop them in their whirling career. In vain did even the abbot himself interpose to relieve them from the curse he had laid on them, and to put a period to the punishment of which he had been the cause. The strongest man in the vicinity held out his hand and caught one of them, with the intention of arresting his rotation and tearing him from the charmed circle. But his arm was torn from him in the attempt, and clung to the dancer with the grip of life till his day was done. The man paid his life as the forfeit of his temerity. No effort was left untried to relieve the dancers, but every one failed. The sufferers themselves, however, appeared quite unconscious of what was passing. They seemed to be in a state of perfect somnambulism, and to be altogether unaware of the presence of any persons, as well as insensible to pain or fatigue. When the expiration of their punishment arrived, they were all found huddled together in the deep cavity which their increasing gyrations had worn in the earth beneath them. It was a considerable time before sense and consciousness returned to them, and indeed they never after could be said to enjoy them completely, for though they lived long, they were little better than idiots during the remainder of their lives. And that is the German folktale of the dancers. And again, you can see the fairy circle and the themes that one finds in a fairy circle tale, but it's not a fairy circle. It's, a priest's circle, if anything else. I just love the fact that this tale has a curse that was laid upon by the priest. And even the priest, once it's going, goes, no, this is too much. Too much, we gotta stop it. And he can't. Because once you have invoked heaven to curse somebody, that curse is getting carried out. That's the underlying moral here. This is Dan Scholes for the Folktale Project. Don't forget that you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, Overcast, anywhere you'd like to get your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at Folktale Project. You can find us on Auto Radio, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, anywhere you like to listen. And you can always head over to folktaleproject.com, where you'll find a new story waiting for you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Next week, we're headed to China for 3 new tales. As always, thank you so much for listening.